President Rod, I move to amend and adopt our agenda as follows. First, to note the final version of consent agenda item 3.18, the communication from Councilor Roof regarding the Councilor Initiative Fund request in support of Highlight BTV 2019. Note updated action for consent agenda item 3.19, the communication from Doreen Kraft, Executive Director of BCA, regarding Highlight Burlington New Year's Eve, quote, to approve the above described amendments to the Burlington City Arts operating budget for FY19 in order to incorporate additional income and expenses required to implement the 2018 Highlight New Year's Eve event and the use of $10,000 of unassigned fund balance to support the implementation of the event, per CAO Anderson. Note revised version of consent agenda item 3.24, resolution authorize use of conservation legacy funds to pay final costs to Vermont Land Trust to aid in acquisition of 311 North Avenue, Board of Finance, per CAO. Per City Attorney's Office. Note final version of the memo for this agenda item per Cindy White. Remove from the agenda item 4.03, the resolution regarding a charter change on councilor recusal involving conflicts of interest. This is Councilor Hartnett's request. Note written materials for agenda item 4.04, business personal property tax gross receipts, per CAO Anderson. Note updated action for agenda item 4.04, business personal property tax gross receipts, quote, to refer the proposed charter changes phasing out the business personal property tax to the Charter Change Committee to review the language, consider the amendments made in the council work session held on November 26th, and report back to the council with recommended charter change language at its December 17th meeting, per CAO Anderson, per City Attorney Blackwood. And there will be additional, note updated action for agenda item 4.05, permit reform, per CAO Anderson. Sorry, I'm getting lost here. Note updated action for agenda item 4.05, permit reform, quote, to refer the proposed charter changes implementing the organizational changes of the administrative's permit reform project to the Charter Change Committee to review the language, consider the comments made in the council's work session held on November 26th, and report back to the council with recommended charter change language at its December 17th meeting, per CAO Anderson, per City Attorney Blackwood. So those are the motions that will be, that are proposed for our deliberative agenda that come to us from the Board of Finance. Correct, City Attorney? Yes. Okay. So we'll need to be referring back to this. Add to the agenda item 8.02, a communication from Eileen Blackwood, our City Attorney, regarding an update on collective bargaining. And then I wanted to also on, let's see, excuse me, 3.13, the consent communication regarding the Pine and Nodell funding request. That was adopted by Board of Finance. The action would be to extend the funding with the following two conditions: that the Big Heavy World will strengthen the collaboration with BCA to align youth concert performance series to citywide performing arts events, and secondly, that Big Heavy World will provide a 3-minute oral report to the Parks, Arts and Culture Committee and or the full council within a year from the time this request was allocated. So I just wanted to add that language, which was accompanying the Board of Finance approval on 3.13.
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Nodell. That motion has been made and seconded now by Councilor Busher. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the agenda as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously, and that motion was long enough to enable me to go talk with Mayor Weinberger, and the city clerk's office. And
I
get
just want to
back in
make
time.
sure that someone was watching me to make sure I didn't miss anything.
As far as I know. Okay, with that, we will conclude that item and move on to item number 2, which we are late on, and that's the public forum. And so I will open the public forum at 7:51. And the first person up to speak is Robert Herndon, and to be followed by Liam Griffin, the only other person who is scheduled to speak. If anyone else would like to, forms are over here. The table, bring them up to the city clerk's office. Good evening, Mr. Herndon. Welcome.
Thank you. Does this work? Yes, I am Bob Herendeen from Ward 4. I'm a Burlington Electric Commissioner, and I'll make one comment about that, but otherwise I speak as a citizen. As a Burlington Electric Commissioner, I support electric bicycles on roads and one-way roadside bike lanes, such as North Avenue. As a year-round cyclist, I am concerned that e-bikes are a quantum jump in motorizing our two-way bike paths, especially the Greenway. I ask that City Council and the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Waterfront develop a coherent, well-publicized, and enforced policy about motorized vehicles on the Greenway. At the moment, there is no policy except silence, while merchants and other constituents sell and promote many varieties of e-bike. Burlington Electric offers rebates for some of these. I support that program. With no regulation, we now have the possibility for 20+ miles per hour motorized bicycles on the Greenway. Some are electric assist, which means that the rider must pedal some for the motor to kick in. Some require only pressing a throttle. Surprisingly high acceleration is also possible. I can tell you that from experience, as I took out a loaner. They really can jump. This seems at odds with the intent of the Greenway. The Greenway is a linear park. It passes through 7 city parks and several exercise sites. The city's website shows photos of multi-use baby carriage pushers, walkers, kids in arms, rollerbladers, and conventional bicycles, all confined into two-way traffic in a width of 11 to 13 feet. Motors seem out of place here. My own position, even as I support e-bikes in general, is to ban them and all motors from the Greenway. Low-speed exceptions for people should be considered, however. But my larger point is that we need an intentional policy rather than tacit acceptance of whatever comes along. Please, councilors, assure that Parks and Rec and you develop an intentional policy, hopefully before the winter is over. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herndeen. Liam Griffin is our final speaker tonight. Good evening, Mr. Griffin, and welcome.
President Wright, Council, Mayor, I brought everyone a book tonight. Ooh,
Your time's up.
time's up. All right. Hopefully the book is a little bit longer. I won't read from the book. I do just want to say thanks for all the work this summer and over the last couple of years, starting to implement Plan BTV Walk Bike. The genesis for purchasing this came out of a book discussion that we had with a group of friends at Battery Park. I put a link up on Facebook and on Twitter and had a GoFundMe campaign funded within 22 hours to buy 14 copies of this from Phoenix Books, shop local. So I've got a copy here for everyone on council, the mayor, and for Spencer. Yeah, Chapin. I already gave him his copy, and I ran into Murrow at the bagel and gave him his copy as well. So I do want to say thanks. The Willard flip this summer from north to south was a really big change in that part of town. Now to have Union going north and Willard going south makes a big difference. I rode part of Pearl Street on the way here. To have a complete connection now from Battery Park all the way to campus is huge. I know there's some folks, parents at my kids' school, who use the new Greenway through the Old North End on a regular basis. You know, the improvements on the Greenway have been huge. And I do want to say thanks in advance for some of the things coming up. I know the Winooski Corridor is a big point of discussion over the next couple of years, as is Main Street. So I hope that while reading this book, everybody finds something. It's called Building the Cycling City, the Dutch Blueprint for Urban Vitality. I know Burlington is not in the Netherlands. The weather kind of seems right like it is right about now, but I hope there's something everyone can take away from reading this. I found it to be really informative. one size definitely won't fit all, but I think there's approaches from a lot of the different cities that are featured in this book that could be applied to the city of Burlington. So hope you enjoy, and thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Appreciate that. And with that, we will close out tonight's public forum. Move to item number 3, which is the consent agenda. And I will take a motion from Councilor Nodell.
President Wright, I move to adopt the consent agenda as amended and to take the actions indicated.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Busher, seconded by Councilor Busher, I should say. And so all those in favor of
President Wright,
Councilor Shannon.
I'd like to ask to divide the question and vote separately on 3.13.
Okay, Councilor Shannon is asking to remove item 3.13 and have a separate vote on that.
Yes.
Okay. So all in favor of the consent agenda as amended and amended again by Councilor Shannon, removing 3.13, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So we have passed the consent agenda, taking the actions indicated, and 3.13. Do we go to that now?
Yep.
Let's go to that now. And Council, I'm going to recognize you, Councilor Shannon.
It's on consent.
It's on consent. That's right. Excuse me.
Just take the vote.
Yeah, we're ready.
Did you want, Councilor Shannon, did you want to speak to this?
That was not my expectation.
Okay, so we just want to have a separate vote on 3.13. We should probably tell the public what this is, though.
It is, you want me to say that?
Why don't you, just so the public understands what we're actually voting on.
The Pine and Nodell funding request for City Council Initiative Fund for Big Heavy World.
Okay. So we don't need any discussion, so all those in favor of that motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
So the vote is 11 to 1 in favor, with Councilor Shannon being the one no vote. Right? That passes. And so we have passed the consent agenda. I am now going to recess the regular city council meeting to go to the Board of Civil Authority, which is run by the mayor. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, President Wright. I'll call to order the Board of Civil Authority at 8:01 p.m. And the first item on the agenda is the agenda. And welcome a motion regarding it. Councilor Paul makes a motion, seconded by President Wright. Discussion, the agenda. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We have an agenda. It brings us to the consent agenda. Welcome a motion there, President Wright.
Move that we pass the consent agenda and take the actions indicated.
Seconded by Councilor Paul. Discussion. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously. And without objection, the Board of Civil Authority is adjourned at 8:01 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now we will reconvene the city council meeting, regular city council meeting at 8 o'clock, and back to the deliberative agenda. Item number 4, 4.01 is a presentation from Kirby Dunn, the Executive Director of Home Share Vermont, with Megan Tuttle, Comprehensive Planner for Planning and Zoning. And this is on the issue of accessory dwelling units, community workshop, and discussion of next steps. Good evening. Welcome, Kirby and Megan.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having us. We're here tonight to give you an update as to...
Kirby, could you pull the microphone in?
Closer?
Yes,
Is that
thank
better?
you.
All right. We're going to give you some updates on informational session that was held on accessory dwelling units in September, and also want to ask for your support on moving this issue forward at the city level, and also to share with you some information regarding a possibility of a grant application that could help us with this issue.
Okay.
So for context, one of the recommendations in the housing, or one of the goals in the Housing Action Plan was to look at a number of housing options that could assist older adults with aging in place. And under that recommendation of the Housing Action Plan was the specific strategy to look at accessory dwelling units as a type of housing that could help homeowners stay in their homes as they age and provide for more flexibility for having a family member or a caretaker live with them. So as a planner in planning and zoning, I've been collaborating with staff in CEDO to actually carry out this strategy from the Housing Action Plan. We've been working together to research both what's happening in Burlington in terms of the utilization of accessory dwelling units, as well as what is happening in other communities around both the utilization of these units and policy and other technical and financial resources that support them. So that's how I became connected with Kirby, is through the workshop that HomeShare Vermont hosted and speaking specifically about Burlington's work, or Burlington's local regulations around accessory dwelling units.
As you know, HomeShare Vermont works to help elders stay in their homes and provide affordable housing to someone who's looking for a place to live. We see 10 times as many people want to live in Burlington as we have homes available, people willing to share their homes. And not everyone is open to the idea of sharing their home. It's a hard thing to do for some people. Some homes are really not set up well to share, and in other cases, some people are not set up well to share. Some people need a little more privacy and space, and they want that separation of a wall, a little more privacy of their own kitchen or their own bathroom. So our board of directors last year put on the agenda for strategic planning the issue of accessory dwelling units. Is that something we could get involved with? Are there people out there who would be interested in looking at this? And we had learned that a lot of places around the country were really pursuing this as an affordable housing option, also as a way for people to age in place. So we put on this workshop in September that we'll tell you about in a few minutes.
And I think to build off of what Kirby was saying about why HomeShare Vermont was interested in, I know also why AARP has expressed interest in accessory dwelling units. We think about what other opportunities accessory dwelling units can provide from a larger housing policy perspective. Kirby also already touched on one of the other benefits that we see from the city's perspective, which is how accessory dwelling units are one of the tools that we have available to us to promote more housing availability and housing affordability. In the research that we've been working on as part of our report, we're finding that many communities are seeing accessory dwelling units provided at below market rate, due largely to lower thresholds and obstacles associated with converting a small part of your home into a home versus building new development or multifamily development. We're also seeing that in many cases, the accessory dwelling unit actually provides some benefit to the homeowner financially. In communities where housing costs are very high, like they are in Burlington, having a small apartment that a family member or someone who you might share your home with can help provide opportunities for either income or other support structures that people might need in their living arrangement. And then finally, it's an opportunity for more flexible housing, flexible living arrangements. We think about multi-generational living and how this is an opportunity that provides both the connection but also the privacy that Kirby was talking about. So as we think about accessory dwelling units, we've been carefully researching how communities are balancing the benefits of accessory dwelling units with protecting neighborhoods and protecting the community from the potential ways that these could be misused. So we look particularly at zoning regulations and how accessory dwelling units are defined. They are, if you think about, having a home that has a basement or an attic or space over the garage, these are often the types of spaces that are repurposed into an accessory dwelling unit. So they're really small spaces inside of a home that are repurposed and incorporated within that home. And importantly, they're apartments that are in single-family owner-occupied homes. So that we're really looking at a type of housing that is intended to be the place where the homeowner is still going to live, and that the housing will really be accessory to their main home. Really fundamentally different than a duplex or a multifamily housing scenario. And one other important thing that we look at are some of the zoning regulations in terms of the intensity of development when we think about accessory dwelling units. One of the other benefits that many communities have discovered in accessory dwelling units as a housing type is their ability to fit well into the neighborhood character and to not negatively impact that negative character. In Burlington, while we permit inclusion or accessory dwelling units, they're required to meet all of the underlying requirements of zoning from a height perspective and setbacks and lot coverage. So we're really talking about units that are integrated into the fabric of that neighborhood rather than being kind of new development in a neighborhood. So in Burlington today, we've seen just over 40 ADUs that we know of that have been developed since about 2003, so in the last 15 years. And as we've been developing this report, we've been looking at what's been happening in other communities. We've seen a pretty significant growth in accessory dwelling units in places like Brattleboro, which I think Kirby will talk about in a moment, over 50 in just a few years. We've seen that the state has identified accessory dwelling units as a priority housing type and has actually explicitly called out accessory dwelling units in the state planning enabling legislation. And we've also seen other communities develop either programs, funding, or technical
Megan,
assistance.
I'm sorry, can you pull the microphone all the way in?
Sure. Is that better?
Thanks.
Okay. I feel like I'm eating it, but
No, we can hear you better.
great.
That's important.
So I was just saying that we've seen other communities from places like Brattleboro, Montpelier, even Waitsfield that have developed either funding or other forms of technical assistance to support homeowners with creating an accessory dwelling unit in their home.
So as Megan mentioned, at the workshop that we held in September, we had over 70 residents from Burlington attend at the Heidenberg Community Senior Center. I know a lot of you wanted to come, but weren't able to. It was a very busy Saturday morning in the end of September. So one of the reasons we're here tonight is to tell you a little bit about what happened. We had some folks come up from Brattleboro, and Brattleboro for a few years now has had a program that they've called Apartments and Homes. And they provide a variety of services to help their residents in Brattleboro put together accessory dwelling units. They provide some technical assistance. They walk people through the process. They help people with issues of design and permitting. They talk to them about becoming a landlord and how to do that. They help them with the screening process. And they follow up once someone has actually built an accessory dwelling unit. So they have a very comprehensive service program that they help folks with. They also provide some low-interest loan and grant funds. And these have really made the difference. These services, this package of services have really made the difference. So they came up and talked to us about how they've done this over the last half a decade. And the success that they've had. We have 40 over probably very many years. They have 50 over 5 years, and that's a much smaller town. Imagine what we could do in the city and the dent we could put in our housing need if we could come up with 100 or 200 accessory dwelling units over the next decade at very little cost and very little difficulty. So we heard from folks in Brattleboro about what they do. We also heard from a couple of residents in the south end of Burlington who put an accessory dwelling unit in their daughter's backyard. So they were hoping to age in place. They wanted to move closer to the grandkids, and they put a unit in the backyard of their daughter. And it's really an incredible home. And they shared a lot of the lessons that they learned by doing that. And that's one of the things that we're hoping to do with this project moving forward, is to help people through this process and to try to standardize the process a little bit for people, so everybody's not reinventing the wheel every time one of these units comes through the process. And lastly, we heard from Megan, who talked about the zoning rules and answered a lot of questions that people had. And some of that information is in your packet tonight. Almost done.
Well, let's,
Oh, she's not.
do you have more to,
Almost
you have
done.
more to go?
Just a small
Let's
amount.
finish the presentation, then I have people in the queue to speak, so.
Great, thank you. So building off of what Kirby said about the number of participants that came to the workshop, I was really surprised by how many people turned out. And not only how many people turned out, but how many people were there that already knew about accessory dwelling units and knew what our zoning said at a basic level. The questions were really detailed. The owners that were there were really interested in this issue. So we heard a lot of really great feedback from them about some of the things that they've identified either in zoning or building codes for the city that have presented challenges that we might want to look at and consider in order to really enable these housing units in a more robust way. We used that question and answer period at the workshop to create an FAQ document that we've provided in the planning office and that we shared with Kirby and with all of the participants that came to the workshop, starting to actually build that educational piece, that supportive technical assistance piece for people that might be interested in this housing option. And further, the information about accessory dwelling units is something we've been relaying back and forth with the Planning Commission, and looking at accessory dwelling units in terms of our regulations is a draft recommendation in Plan BTV, in the draft update of Plan BTV, and something that the Planning Commission is definitely looking forward to being able to talk about in a wholesale way related to housing policy for Burlington.
So from the workshop, based on the questions and the comments of folks there, there were sort of three general areas that people wanted to talk about. One was just general education, needing information. The second area was policy changes, and there was a lot of suggestions for different levels of policy changes. And lastly was just financial assistance, helping people sort of get started. Could be a variety of ways we could take this. So one of the reasons we're here tonight is because, as you might have heard, there was a $37 million housing bond that the state passed. And as part of that housing bond, they have a small set of funds set aside for innovative projects. And we have submitted, HomeShare Vermont has submitted a letter of intent to participate in that program at VHCB's request, with an interest of looking at accessory dwelling units and home sharing, and seeing if this is something that the city would like to work together on. So we have that letter of intent in. If we are invited to apply for a full application, I expect that will be in January, so we should find out in December. So one of the reasons we're here tonight is to see what your interest is and see if you would like to take this journey together to pursue accessory dwelling units in the city of Burlington as a way to help seniors age in place and help other people find affordable housing. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the presentation on this important issue. And we have a number of counselors lined up in the queue, and we will start with Counselor Paul.
Thank you. So first of all, I admire the work that HomeShare does. I think you provide a valuable mission to many people in Burlington. And I think, I understand, and I imagine most of us certainly understand that the accessory dwelling units can, for many people, be the difference between remaining in their home and not remaining in their home. One of the concerns, and I got this from a couple of constituents that wrote to me over the weekend, was about enforcement. We're probably pretty good as a city about creating these kinds of things, but the enforcement part of it, we still have to work on the enforcement part, and it's not always easy to enforce certain things. One of the things that you have in your PowerPoint is that in order to do this as an accessory dwelling unit, the owner, it must be owner occupied, either in the primary unit, so to speak, and or the accessory dwelling unit. So the first question is, how do you enforce that? The second is, if 2 years later, after you've built the accessory dwelling unit, for example, just as an example, the older person, if there's an older person and a caregiver, for whatever reason needs to go into an assisted living place. So they're no longer living there. Or for whatever reason, the owner decides to sell. Now, we have plenty of examples in Burlington, well, not too many, but enough examples in Burlington where a property owner will decide to, a property owner who is looking to rent will buy a property like that, and pretty soon there are multiple people living in that, none of whom own that property. So that was the question that I got from a few constituents was, how are you going to enforce that, and what happens when the owner is no longer living there? Thank you.
Great questions. I can speak about enforcement just generally, and that's something that we can follow up on more to get more information about enforcement around this issue. But one of the primary mechanisms that we utilize is actually a deed restriction on the property that requires that owner occupancy. If that property is no longer owner occupied, then there's a mechanism that actually requires some of the facilities of the unit to be removed so that it no longer is able to function as an independent living facility. And if the property is sold, then those requirements run with the property, and a new owner would be required to either comply with the owner occupancy requirement or have the facilities removed so that the unit is not able to be occupied on its own.
And if I might just ask, so if the owner still owns the property but is no longer living there for reasons like the example that I just gave, that deed has not changed. I mean, that property has not transferred. So what is to prevent somebody from just renting it?
Right. I think in that case, it would no longer be considered owner occupied at that point. So the same requirements would apply.
And they would be able to rent it because anybody can rent their house out. It's
they-
just that the additional unit would have to be part of the primary residence. The kitchen or the bath would be removed.
Right, so that it couldn't be
be-
occupied separately from the
Right.
home.
So it would be a single-family home again, and that could be rented, just like any single-family home could be rented today.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councilor Powell. I have Councilor Roof, then Busher, Tracy, and Pine. And please make sure you keep those microphones pulled way in so we can really hear you.
My question is really quick. I know that the RH, residential high density, is not an area contemplated for the use of this sort of use, rather. For those people who live in RH areas who say, wow, this might be a good solution for me, could you break down in simple terms why this doesn't work in those areas?
That's a great question, and I actually want to say thank you to Councilor Roof for bringing this to our attention. So presently in our zoning ordinance, accessory dwelling units are permitted in a single-family home. And as such, in the zoning, there's a part of our zoning in the use table that says that accessory dwelling units are permitted in RL and RM zoning districts, basically wherever a single-family home could be built today. So our zoning has a loophole that's left out in considering existing single-family homes. So that's an item that's actually on the list that's discussed in the report about whether or not we want to make a change to that regulatory tool to allow them in pre-existing single-family homes where a new single-family home wouldn't be allowed today.
Thank you, Councilor Roof. Councilor Busher, then Councilor Tracy.
So thank you. I always love when home share comes here because it meant so much to me and trying to work through issues with my mom in Massachusetts, and we're so lucky to have it in Vermont. And so I want to support any initiative that offers an opportunity for people to utilize home share, even though they're not in the home, but maybe living in an accessory unit. So the pilot seems really appropriate. Here comes the downside for me, and people have touched on it. So there was a planning director whose name was Mark Eldridge, who talked about the vulnerability of neighborhoods around institutions, around the colleges and universities, and how this wonderful tool could be turned against the community. And so I'm just going to speak to this a little bit. So an example is in my neighborhood, a parent of a college student will buy a house, okay, but will put it in the name of their college student, so it's owner occupied. And so when you build an accessory unit, you now are able to expand the number of people living, and I don't know how number of unrelated living in a structure now, because now you've got a secondary structure, would now spill out and really impact a neighborhood in a very negative way. And so this is a concern that I have that I haven't been able to wrap my head around. I don't know enough about how you can protect neighborhoods from this, but I think it's really one thing that is very concerning to me. Brattleboro is a small community, and I think it's really important to see how communities that are homes to colleges and universities, how they've dealt with this, and are there protection mechanisms like people are talking about, so we as a community can advance something that's really positive for some, but not have it turn against us and create a problem that we can't, once it's out of Pandora's box, you can't put it back in. So I'm so conflicted right now with the desire to move forward because I want this to happen for so many people in Burlington. But I am really concerned about how this tool will be used in the wrong hands. And so I just really wanted to share those concerns with all of you. So thank you.
The specific question about how other communities with universities or colleges in them is something that we can add to the research that we do before the report is brought to CDNR.
But President Wright, might just say, I think that Councilor Paul's point about enforcement and, how do we really manage this? It's a good thing, but how do you manage it so that it doesn't become a bad thing? Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Busher. Councilor Tracy, to be followed by Pine, Dean, and Mason. Councilor
Thank you.
Tracy.
Thank you, President Wright, and thank you for the presentation. Two sort of general categories that I've noticed of tiny houses or accessory units that I've been seeing pop up are the ones that sort of convert a barn or a carriage house or something in an older home kind of situation that's kind of a fixed situation. But then I've seen already in place ones that are on wheels, and then I know of another friend building one off-site, planning to bring one on wheels into Burlington and place it behind an existing home. Is there a distinction that you're drawing between the ones that are in place and the lot coverage and some of the regulations of those that are fixed and in place sort of on a foundation, and ones that are on wheels and that could maybe get moved at a later date when that use no longer makes sense for the home, or where the owner wants to move it? Does that make sense? Are you seeing that?
So that is a question that came up at the workshop and is something I think that we need to have more conversation about. Today, the way that we look at whether it's on wheels or whether it's on a detached structure that's got a permanent foundation, either way, we would consider it under the accessory dwelling ordinance. The one kind of caveat to that is whether or not it's on the property for a certain period of time. So we have provisions in our ordinance about temporary uses, and there are different requirements for it, whether it's there, less than 30 days, whether it's there 30 to 60 days, or whether it's there more than 60 days. So it's considered in a different way depending on how long it actually occupies the property. But I think that one of the related things that was in the Housing Action Plan was looking at small unit types and considering the different nuances of what these unit types are and how our ordinances treat them. So I would say some of those questions are kind of related to some of the other Housing Action Plan issues as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Tracy. Councilor Pine, then Dean Mason Hartnett. Councilor Pine.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to know if if there's a paper, a white paper, or a study of some sort that I thought that CEDA was working on something, and I wanted to know where that was because I didn't hear exactly when we might see that. And if either of you know if that exists, if it's ready to come out, and when we're going to get our hands on that.
So yes, there is a white paper that CEDO has been developing. That's something that Planning and Zoning has been collaborating with CEDO on the development of. As far as when the timeline for that is, I think that it's soon. I think that it's a matter of just kind of getting things in the queue for CDNR. So I'll let actually Neil and Ian follow up with you about the specific timing of when that might come to CDNR.
Okay, great. The fact that Councilor Busher mentioned that Mark Eldridge had concerns about this is an interesting one because even though we have embraced the idea and our state legislature told all communities to make it an allowable use, we really have done practically nothing in Burlington for the last 20 years on this particular issue. So I don't think that's where we should be. I think we should be moving aggressively. And I think the idea of a pilot is a great one in addressing the concerns that councilors have raised. Councilor Paul's concerns and Councilor Busher's concerns are legitimate, and I think they need to be addressed head on, and I think we can find a way to do both. I really do. I believe this is a great part of our housing future and our solution to address the housing needs.
Thank you, Councilor Pine. Councilor Dean.
Thank you, President Wright. Just wanted to extend a very personal welcome to Kirby Dunn. My mom was a member of the Home Share Vermont board for many, many years, and I've had the opportunity to attend quite a few events, and it's been a great relationship. I have a specific question about, you mentioned in the example of Brattleboro that they had developed some methods to actually encourage people to take on an accessory unit development, including information on property tax and design standards, low interest loans and so forth. Who administers those? Is that something that the city takes on, or is there an independent organization that offers that? How does that get done?
So there's a separate nonprofit that does its work a lot through volunteers, believe it or not, and they help people through this process. But it is supported by the city. The grant funds and the low interest loan money flow through the city, and it is a smaller scale place, so I think it is a more doable project at a certain level in terms of the permitting and building process, for sure. A lot of the projects that they've done have been, they call it apartments in homes. So most of these are not big additions or big standalone units in the backyard. They are, the attic, the basement, a part of the home, maybe above the garage, or instead of the garage. But a lot of folks in Burlington have done a lot of that already. A lot of people have turned their garages into living space, and especially in the smaller homes, in the New North End in particular. But yeah, so they've got an incredible volunteer group down there that has been running this and working with people.
Yeah. And just to follow up, so are you seeing that to be similar, what we should take on as a model as well?
I think it's a harder process here, so I think it will be harder for volunteers to play as much of a role. I would, we are looking at possibly putting in some funding for staffing in this grant request or something similar to that, so that there is a one person that can help people through that process. We're also looking at coming up with maybe some sample architectural plans, a couple standard plans that people could take off the shelf and modify for their particular need. So just some real tools that people can use and some assistance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Dean. Councilor Mason, then Hartnett.
Thank you, President Wright. Sort of picking up on Councilor Dean's comments, but not on the financial, I'm curious where the policy change, where it goes from here. There appear to be a number of potential incentives for us to consider in order to incentivize people to do these. Is that going back to the Planning Commission? Who's sort of owning taking that forward? And I guess my second sort of question is, if the state grant does not come through for whatever reason, where does this lie, or what happens to these proposals?
Sure. So I'll start with the report, the white paper that the Housing Action Plan directed that Councilor Pine asked about is something that will include a number of recommendations for the City Council and other boards to consider. They span regulatory tools, educational resources, as well as financial or technical assistance tools, some of which can be done by the city, others of which might be done through partner agencies. So ultimately, that will be up to the CD&R to evaluate and provide some direction to the city on which ones they would like us to pursue. There are a number of them that do have to do with regulatory changes that the Planning Commission is anxious to have referred to them to discuss. So that'll be something that they'll definitely take the leadership on. And I think that this grant opportunity is something that provided us sort of an extra boost of energy sort of early in the process to think about financial resources to assist with this. That was one of the major things that we identified in the research, was identifying some kind of funding source. So if that grant doesn't come through, I think we'll be looking for other options as well.
I agree with everything she said.
Thank you, Councilor Mason. Councilor Hartnett, and then the mayor.
Thank you. I was just thinking about the enforcement piece of this, and although it's a critical piece in this whole thing, over the 8 years I've been on the council, I can't tell you how many resolutions we passed where there was no enforcement, and we passed them anyways. And I know this is a little different when we talk about housings, but I don't want enforcement to be the stop sign for this program, right? I mean, we need to move forward. I think a lot of people don't, maybe they do understand, how important it is, not only to maybe the senior that's living in that home, but actually the person that might be sharing it. I was involved personally, as you know, and so you have people that are been abused, domestic violence individuals who don't feel safe in their home anymore, have gone to home share and made a great partnership. It's been amazing. You have people that lose their jobs, and the difference of being on the street or home share is the difference, right? And so when you put it in that perspective and you think about it, what a difference that this makes. Yes, enforcement's important, but it can't stop us. It just can't, because we've been idle, as Councilor Pine said, for a long time on this program, and it has helped so many individuals, not only in this state, but in other states as well. And I just think that we can figure out the enforcement piece, and the sooner we do that, the better off. So I hope that we see fast movement on this, and I think it would be a huge benefit to everybody here in Burlington to move forward on this. So thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Hartnett. Mayor Weinberger, and then I think we're ready to conclude.
Thanks, President Wright. I want to thank Kirby and Megan for bringing this forward, and as well as the kind of parallel work that's been going on in CEDO, which is finally ripening. This pursuing ADUs is something that has formally been part of our Housing Action Plan now since the council passed it back in 2014, I believe, and I'm among those that have been frustrated by the lack of progress on this issue, and that I do think it is one of the more significant ways that we can impact our affordable housing crisis, and we certainly the mayor's office always think of this as a hot crisis. It's been going on for a long time, but that doesn't mean it is not something that is urgent and that we need to be bringing every tool we can to address. And this is a really significant tool that, as the examples tonight point out, has been better utilized by other communities and has great potential to have a real impact on the creation of new homes. I think it's really, we talk a lot in this community about income inequality and equity, and this is really one of the most meaningful ways in which we can have an impact in local government on equity. This is an equity issue with respect to seniors who want to stay in this community. This is a real option for them to be able to stay despite financial pressures in later years. We know that there are many other types of households that struggle to stay or get a place in this community and take advantage of the opportunities, the economic opportunities that Burlington has. This is a way to create substantial new homes for them. And it's an equity. I think this is important for us to think of it. This is an equity issue in another sense too, in that we are a city that has done a lot for a long period of time to try to improve our affordable housing situation. And we know, through the work that has been done over the last few years with respect to inclusionary zoning, that that work has largely fallen to certain parts of the city, not to the entire city. And this is a way really for the entire city, I think, to share in that work and find a way for us to become more affordable broadly. So I will be strongly supporting this. I'm excited that this is moving to the point of where we can start making on-the-ground change, and look forward to the next steps in this.
Any other counselor who wants to speak on this? All right, hearing none, thank you very much, Megan and Kirby. We appreciate that presentation on this really important topic. Thank you, and look forward to the next steps. Item number 4.02 is a report on residential parking management plan from Chapin Spencer.
Thank you, and I have with me John King from the Burlington Police Department as well.
Good evening, Mr. King.
We understood, thank you for having us tonight. We understood that you would like us to make this exceedingly brief.
Yes.
So we were requested to come back after a resolution in May from Councilor Hartnett to report back on the status of the proposed revisions to the residential parking permit parking program. So to do that expeditiously, we've put together a 4-slide PowerPoint, and we will quickly highlight the proposed changes that will be considered by the DPW Commission on Wednesday night. The 8 administrative changes are listed here. Number 1 is institute a fee for residential permits. The proposed amount is $10 per year per permit. Number 2, cap the number of permits per dwelling unit. Currently, a dwelling can have as many permits as there are cars that they have available. We would like to cap this at 4 per single family and 3 per unit on multi-unit parcels. That's to help limit the oversubscription of parking on high-demand streets. Number 3, clarify the acceptable forms of documentation for proving residency, and John can answer any questions on that. Number 4, creating transferable permits. Currently, either you have a sticker on a car or a guest pass that has limited rights. These transferable permits would carry the same rights as a full sticker. Number 5, provide 1 voucher for voiding a mistaken ticket. The city spends a significant amount of time processing tickets that neighbors have mistakenly received, from helping a senior citizen in the house or taking groceries and all of a sudden getting a $75 ticket. And then the city spends time working on those void requests. Creating contractor permits so that there is a simple and clear process as you're renovating your home for getting permits for your contractors. 7, clarify policies for businesses and fraternities in RPP areas. And number 8, disentangling the regulation around car share vehicles from the residential permit parking ordinance. Next. Then we heard from the public. We went out with these to the TUC and to the Public Works Commission and a citywide front porch forum post to get input. And here are key areas where we've received input and changes we have made. First one, and this was not in your packet, this has just recently been put together, so that's why we really want to take the time to highlight this slide, as the DPW Commission will be deliberating on ordinance language that incorporates these 5 changes. Number one, remove the fee for permits, that $10 per permit per year fee on RPP streets that accept some level of public parking. So we got a request on Bradley Street, which has just recently adopted RPP, but allows 4 hours of public parking on that street. They said, hey, we're making a choice to allow some level of public access on a street. Could you incentivize that? So we have reviewed that and have proposed language to do that. We also got a request to allow 2-year permits instead of 1-year permits. Currently there are 2-year permits, and the request was to maintain that. So we have proposed language to do so. Third, there was a concern about reselling of permits, especially the transferable permits. So we wanted to make explicitly clear that we are prohibiting such acts, and that has been written into the proposed ordinance language. Or people said, hey, if I'm completely renovating my house, I may need more than 4 contractors, 4 vehicles. Can you increase that? So we increased it to 8. And the last one, we got a request for property owners who do not live on the parcel to be able to get a permit if they need to come by for maintenance or other activities. And we have revised the proposed ordinance to do that. Next. Last slide is what we've done and where we're going. We've done these outreach efforts. We've gotten public comment, and we're going to the commission on Wednesday. John, anything to add?
Not at this time. All of the recommended changes we support. I think it will improve the administration of the program and provide more ability for the residents to get their permits and participate in the program.
All right. We'll open up to the council. Councilor Hartnett, then Busher.
Thanks. I do have an issue with, I know you mentioned Bradley Street, and so we incentivize them to reduce the $10 permit fee, but it sounds like, it's almost like they're letting us do us a favor on their street. It's a public street. I mean, we should be able to do what we want with that street. I mean, the fact that we're even giving them residential parking alone, which we've given out way too much in this city, particularly way too much in the south end, all right? In fact, I don't think there's any residential parking north of BHS, if I'm correct. So you think about all the residential parking we have and where it's located, okay? It's located in the south end. So I wouldn't be in favor of waiving any fees because we're allowing 4 hours of public parking on streets. And I hope we're going to continue to do that, not just Bradley, but with other streets that request it. And I would hope that, we would really kind of put a hold on residential parking only. It's an elitist system that we have in this city for a lot of neighborhoods, really except for Ward 1, in my opinion. And I would hope that we would, I'm glad this report came back, but I think it's kind of half done. And I really want us to continue to work on a better program for residential parking and reducing some of it. And even considering in some areas in the city where we would eliminate residential parking for the summer months from May 15th to August 15th, where we have it now, right? And so there would be public parking on all those streets during that time period. Basically, we have residential parking largely because of the University of Vermont, and the medical center, and I understand that. But to me, there would be no reason to have residential parking on Summit Street between June, July, and August. I mean, to me, that would be, right? I mean, that's something we should look at. I mean, we're giving these residents really, top treatment here for private parking is what it boils down to, right? I mean, it really, I want to go to an event at UVM in July, and I want to park on Summer Street and walk up. I can't do that, and I pay taxes in this city, and I mean, it's a public street. It's just not right. We've gone way too far with residential parking. So, and I know once you, as Councilor Busher just said, once you give them something, it's hard to take it back, and I understand that, but we need to figure out a better way to do this. And so I hope that this is, just a piece of what we need to work on down the road. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Hartnett. Councilor Busher, and then Councilor Pine.
So I want to thank you for the list of meetings that you've attended and how you've tried to get these changes out to the public. It was important for me that you went to all the NPAs and that you did Front Porch Forum, and so that's good. And I read through this and I thought it was a good update and good information. I did speak to Chapin in advance of this meeting. There are a couple of things that I thought I just wanted to highlight. One is that if indeed you need a replacement sticker, you have to pay $75. And I just thought, if someone was in an accident and the sticker and the bumper was destroyed, I'm not so sure they really should pay $75, but that's just my 2 cents on that. One of the things that I'm really glad that you're responsive to the people that gave feedback also, but one of the things that I think I have an issue with, I love the fact that I could get a 2-year permit, but I think we run the risk of having people move around a lot in the city. And so if you're given a 2-year permit, you may not live next year in the same spot, but you might have a sticker that allows you to park in a place that is now already occupied by another vehicle that actually does live on that street, but it might be at least in Ward 1, either near the hospital or near the university, etc. So I'm not sure that is such a great idea, even though it's convenient, and I would benefit from that convenience, but I do think it needs to be thought through a little more carefully. I didn't understand how small businesses in a residential area, how they'd function. How do their customers, if they don't have off-street parking, actually function? Where do they park? I wasn't clear on this communication. So if someone could enlighten me, that would be important. And for anyone who is a small business owner in one of these areas, I think it's important for them to know also.
There's half a dozen businesses within the resident parking area. The two that quickly come to mind is the India House near you in the campus kitchen, and there's a couple attorney offices downtown. They all have guest passes currently so that they're registered in the program. If their customers get tickets, they just collect them, put them in an envelope and send them down to me, and we void them for them. The same process for their employees. I do check their zoning requirements, and if they have more employees than zoning requirement for parking, they also just send me the tickets and we void them for them.
That's good information, because I just didn't want to harm them or impact their business, and so I wasn't clear exactly what happened. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilor Busher. Councilor Pine.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's one of those things back in the day when I was a city councilor that I got a lot of feedback from constituents in the neighborhood around George Street and Johnson Street. And I lived on Peru Street, and I saw evidence of downtown workers who would come to our neighborhood in the morning, park in our neighborhood, and then many people don't have driveways. So people in the neighborhood had nowhere to park. And so all resident-only parking neighborhoods are not created equal, really. They're really not the same. So please don't confuse a neighborhood that you think is doing it to keep people out with a neighborhood that's doing it to really allow themselves the flexibility of being able to park in their neighborhood where they live. So there is really an actual legitimate need for neighbors that surround our downtown are really constrained for parking. Buildings that were maybe originally intended for single-family occupancy are no longer single-family. There's not adequate parking on site, and the idea behind residential parking in those neighborhoods, I think, is a really legitimate issue. And I do hear the concern or the need for this type of program near the university and the hospital as well. So I don't want us to get off track and say that this is a bad policy. I think it needs to be controlled, it needs to be managed, but I think there's a lot of folks in my ward who have no options other than to park on the street. And when downtown workers fill up the street spaces, they have nowhere to park anywhere near home, and that's not right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Pine. Councilor Mason.
Thank you, President Wright. Question and then a comment. The question relates to the non-resident owner permit. I'm assuming that's not a transferable. Is that tied to a vehicle and a license plate number? Otherwise, my concern would be you just gave, now that's that 6 permit that can be transferred to anyone.
When you come in to get a permit, you would have your choice. The vehicle sticker goes on the bumper of your car related to that car. The license plate will be indicated on the sticker.
Okay.
If you select the hanging permit, then yes, the hanging permit is designed that you could use it today, your wife could use it tomorrow, or a guest could use it, and you share it. I think the value of limiting the permits to 4 for a family or 3 to a dwelling unit is going to control a lot of the abuse and excessive permits that are out there. I checked this morning, and right now I have 7 dwelling units in the city with 9 permits per dwelling unit.
My comment, sort of, which goes beyond a little bit of this, relates to sort of some of the policy concerns. I've personally been on the wrong side of a $75 ticket on Summit Street. I had the privilege of attending sort of the grand reopening at the Alumni House, along with, hundreds of others on a beautiful Saturday afternoon in the summer. And I and many others were chagrined to sort of walk out to, a row of $75 tickets, on a beautiful Saturday afternoon on the widest street in town. And it did make you sort of think, this doesn't seem right, for those of us, whether taxpayers or not, it's a public street. So those are the sort of areas where I do think we need to think, is this right? And should we be doing that? That's a topic for another day, but I felt compelled to sort of share my own personal story in light of some of the comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mason. Councilor Shannon.
Thank you, and thank you for working on this. It's a very touchy subject, as we all know, and impossible to make everybody happy, but I think you have been very responsive to the constituent feedback that you've gotten. I am a little bit concerned about the issue that Councilor Mason just raised, which is about the stickers versus the hang tags and the transferability of the hang tags. Do we think that if you're allowed 4 stickers per vehicle, do we think that we need to have transferable hang tags? Doesn't that just lend itself to selling them, which is a thing? I mean, we can make a rule that you can't sell them, but if we don't have any ability to know whether that's a hang tag that was sold or a hang tag that was issued to you because it's not connected to a license plate, I'm wondering if it would be sufficient to allow the 4 stickers and then have, in addition to that, you get a guest pass, which is a hang tag, right?
The guest passes term guest pass will be eliminated, and the transferable pass will be available. To answer, one of the examples I use is the family, where you have the husband with a car and a truck, the wife with a car, and 2 children with cars. There's 5 vehicles, but you only can have 4 stickers. So that means 1 car will never be allowed to park on the city street if you didn't have the transferable pass that you could have hanging inside the door, and whoever's on the street grab it and go park.
That seems like in these areas that we're talking about, that seems, I wonder if that's a real case. I think it's a real case in the suburbs for sure, but in these areas with highly restricted parking access, I wonder if it might be better to maybe limit the number of hang tags, to say, even if you said 3 stickers and 1 hang tag, so there's some transferability. And I'm just offering that as a discussion. You can check that with the feedback that you've heard. rather than just mine, but, you know, what people in the community are telling you, because I am a little bit suspicious that that feature is being used by families, and I think it opens us up to some abuse.
The ordinance does have in it that each dwelling unit can only have 2 transferable passes. So we are.
And
Okay.
2 stickers only. So for permits, 2 can be
2 have to be
transferable.
stickers.
2 have to be stickers.
Okay.
And you can have up to 2 transferable for that very reason that people were concerned on the advisory committee of having 4 transferables per unit that could move. And to know each residential street is a different zone, so you can't sell your transferable pass to someone on another street unless they're coming to park in your neighborhood, and then that behavior can be more easily identified. So we can change this and revise it as we need to, but this was what the advisory committee kind of came up with the staff that seemed a reasonable balance.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Councilor Hartnett?
Just a comment on Councilor Pine's remarks. Any street that doesn't have driveways obviously should have residential parking. But that doesn't mean if it was a single-family home once and now someone bought the place and he's running it to 7 people or 6 people, that we should provide all of them with parking spaces now. And so I think the flip side of that is I know a lot of people that would love to come downtown, but can't afford the parking, right? And so they do try to find a space or 2 to walk downtown and come and shop and stuff. And so I think we need to realize that now. And I just think this overall needs to be rehauled. And I would hope that we would entertain putting a committee together, a person from each ward maybe, and to relook at how we do residential parking. And I think there's a better way to do it. And I'm not saying what we do now is all wrong, but I think there's a lot of room for improvement here. And I think there's a lot of streets that we have residential parking on that don't warrant it.
Thank you, Councilor Hartnett. Councilor Jang, and then we are ready to move forward.
Thank you. And I think these are a couple of questions. And the first one is, does your property value goes up if you have a street parking next to your door on the street? Are there any ties between? Do you understand the question?
Yes, I think I do, Councilor Jang. We have not studied whether there is a correlation between property values and whether or not there's residential parking on the street. There are a number of factors related to availability of parking that do drive property values, whether it's off-street parking, on-street parking, and proximity to other parking resources. So the RPP does, in high-density, high-demand areas, provide a higher likelihood that a resident can find parking adjacent to their home.
So it looks like this is a report from a resolution that was introduced by Councilor Hartnett.
Yes.
Right? And I do remember, if I remember correctly, that was a component, like one of the questions that came up, if there is any correlation between street parking and property value. And here looks like it was not something that you studied.
Yes, that is correct. The original resolution included a sentence asking for that work to get done. There was a amendment to strike that from the resolution. I was just checking the minutes from the meeting. The deleted lines 27 through 30 through 29. It was unanimous and the motion carried. So that work was not kind of directed to be done by the council and was not done.
Thank you, Councilor Jang. Continue.
Still have the floor. Yeah. So what I want to get. I think I'm okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Jang. Councilor Nodell.
I'm sorry, President Wright, I will be as brief as possible. First of all, I wanted to say we did not see John King very frequently, and it's good to have you here with us tonight.
Thank you.
And thank you for all your work for the city over the years.
Thank you.
What's that?
Commander.
Commander, excuse me, Commander King. Get with the program, Nodell. Yeah. So I wanted to reflect on Councillor Jiang's comments, which is I do think that in the area of parking, we're making a lot of changes that impact people's access to parking, enhancing it in some cases, and reducing it in others. And these changes in policy don't have anything to do with what you gentlemen are working on, but they do get, I think they should be taken into account in assessment, in our assessment. And if the city makes decisions that have an adverse effect on people's property values, I think we need to look at that in our assessment process. That's just a very large global comment, but there are some inequities that get created, and I think if it's our way of saying we're going to equitably allocate the cost of the policies that we adopt.
Thank you, Councillor Nodell. Any other councillor? Hearing none, thank you for the presentation. When will we hear about this again?
So this is going to the DPW Commission this Wednesday, where they will vote on this, and then it will take approximately a month for the ordinance to get published if approved, and then we have talked about sometime earlier in the new year these changes going into effect.
All right, thank you.
One other quick comment, Chapin mentioned counterfeiting the permits. You're familiar with the motor vehicle sticker you have on your car from inspection? The permits will have that type of material built into them, so they can't be counterfeited.
Right, great. Thank you, Mr. King and Mr. Spencer. Item number 4.03 has been removed and will reappear at a later date. So we'll move on to the next item, 4.04. City Council had work sessions earlier this evening on 3 important items: potential charter changes, which were the business personal property tax, permit reform, and the downtown improvement district. We have potentially some very big and exciting charter changes put before the voters. And the first one before us tonight is 4.04, and it's the business personal property tax, both in the work session and then at the Board of Finance. And so I will recognize Councillor Nodell on that.
Thank you, President Wright. I move to refer the proposed charter changes phasing out the business personal property tax to the Charter Change Committee to review the language, consider the comments made in the Council's work session held on November 26th, and the comments made in the Board of Finance meeting of November 26th, and report back to the Council with recommended charter change language at its December 17th meeting. After second, I'll...
Seconded by Councillor Hartnett. Councillor Nodell?
Thank you, President Wright. I slightly changed the language in the motion to add that we want the charter change to also consider comments made in the Board of Finance. And I will wait and let Councillor Paul address that, since they refer to some ideas that she brought to us. But this is just to be brief. This is about taking this business personal property tax, which is a very confusing name for a tax, but it is a tax on machinery and equipment. And it raises about $1 million a year. We're one of the few communities in our area that imposes this tax, and very arguably has an adverse effect on business viability and attracting businesses into the city of Burlington. And we want businesses good paying jobs in the city of Burlington. So this would create a true exemption at $45,000, which does not currently exist. That is, it doesn't exist universally, and it would make it a universal exemption. And it secondly establishes a deadline for eliminating the tax altogether, but does it in such a way that there will not be too much difficulty in absorbing the lost revenue in terms of our annual operating budgets. So I want to acknowledge the great leadership that our president has shown on this issue. Other councilors have as well. And I would this was a resolution that we unanimously adopted in January of 2018, and here we are in the same year actually taking action. So I think it's really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nodell. Councillor Paul?
Thank you. So thank you to Councillor Nodell for adding that language. We did have a very productive conversation about this at the Board of Finance. And one of the things that I think we all are aware of is that there are a number of businesses who have left the city because of this tax. There are other businesses that have moved their machinery to the best of their ability outside the city limits so that they don't have to pay this tax. Over time, that does have an impact on jobs and on revenue coming into the city. Not this revenue, but other revenue. And so what I had suggested was that, while I didn't want to go and change the charter change, I was hopeful that we might be able to work actively towards eliminating the tax instead of in FY26, hopefully in a shorter period of time, perhaps by FY24. The information that we have on the proposal for the elimination of the tax says that and what would be referred to charter change would be, it says at the very bottom, the tax on the business personal property would be eliminated effective July 1, 2026. And Councilor Nodell, after what I had said, suggested that perhaps we say that it should be eliminated no later than July 1 of 2026. So that information will go. I'm sorry, I thought somebody said something. That information would go to the city attorney, who acknowledged that there probably is a little bit more that needs to be done with that, but would certainly be a part of the conversation at charter change. So whatever we can do, I think, to eliminate it, the sooner the better. It is a lot of money. And I would also, as well, like to acknowledge that the 45,000 that we did come up with a couple of years ago. We went from 25 to 35 to 45, and the reason we went to 45 was because of President Wright. So there were a lot of people who benefited from that, and hopefully a lot more will in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. Any other councillor? Councillor Pine?
Just real briefly for members of the public, it may appear that this is a corporate giveaway. That's what people might say is, why are they giving taxes back to companies in Burlington? The problem with this tax is it really taxes the wrong thing. It taxes investments. It discourages companies from investing in and growing their businesses here. It doesn't actually tax their profits. It doesn't tax their wealth. It's not based on ability to pay. It just is a tax that's applied to businesses because they own equipment. It's kind of a bizarre concept. I think it goes back to the day, because Burlington and Winooski were big mill towns at one point, that mills maybe had these huge pieces of equipment, and it just made sense to do it that way. So it's incredibly antiquated, and I just want folks to know, don't worry, this isn't some big corporate giveaway here. This will benefit the smallest businesses that are trying to make a living and provide decent family jobs. So I just want folks to know about that.
Thank you, Councillor Pine. Councillor Shannon.
Thank you, President Wright. I wanted to thank our CAO, Beth Anderson, who really has done the heavy lifting on this and has brought this back to us in a timely manner and really thoughtful. And it's not easy to figure out how to eliminate taxes, but the proposal that we have before us is an excellent proposal for all of the reasons that Councillor Pine just stated. I just wanted some clarification that when the statement is made, the Charter Change Committee should consider the comments at the Board of Finance. Since I wasn't at the Board of Finance, those are the comments that Councillor Paul just summarized.
That's correct.
And that's the full extent of it.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Which is basically to potentially, do it no later than 2026 and earlier if possible. Councillor Jang.
Yep. I think I want to thank you for bringing this resolution here in front of us. Yeah, President Janodel and many others who crafted it and brought it here in front of us for us to have discussion and then put it. But Beth, again, I think reading your memo was just incredible. I think you have done an incredible, wonderful job, and I want to thank you for that. But at the same time, I do feel like we need to find a better mechanism, maybe. You know, I think it is important. We want businesses, the smaller they are, we want them to thrive. We want them to succeed here in this community. But at the same time, if we eliminate this cap, this tax in 2016, there might be some gap in terms of funding for the city. I mean, for the businesses to understand it and also the community to understand it, there might be. We are hopeful that there will be other revenues that will be coming, such as a TIF and all of that. But me personally, I do think that we, the charter chains, we need to explore other mechanisms as well. And I think one of them was, at least for those businesses in the beginning, to not be taxed at all. To not be taxed at all, but maybe down the road, maybe in 5-10 years, and they can start being taxed on the value of their properties, on that. But eliminating it, to me, it is just that the taxpayers, the homeowners, will work hard to pay the difference. You know, that's based on my understanding, based on I read, and I look forward to follow this specific issue until it come back to us for voting.
Thank you, Councillor Jane. Councillor Busher.
So, thank you. So one of the things that I did address at the Board of Finance was the fact that had the administration thought of any other way besides increasing the municipal tax rate to bridge this financial gap, had they thought of any other way so that there wouldn't be that shift, small that it may be, to the taxpayer. And that discussion is still being contemplated and will continue. But I think all of us understand the value of eliminating this and wanting to move forward, and understand that short-term cost shifting that we want to mitigate as best we can. So that's part of the equation, not part of the motion, but part of the equation that will be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Busher. Mr. Mayor.
President Wright, thank you. The way the motion got written up for the board docs tonight called for the charter change committee to finish its work and refer this back for the December 17th meeting. There's a lot of moving parts with these 3 charter changes. The way that we had proposed in trying to kind of get through everything that needs to is that the referral back actually be for December 10th, so that this of the 3 charter changes would be ready for action at the December 10th meeting. So just wanted to raise that for consideration. I believe the charter change committee is set up and to have 2 meetings between now and the 10th and be able to do that. So just wanted to raise that. I guess on substance too, I do support this for reasons stated earlier. I won't repeat it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Nodell.
President Wright, what would be the mechanism for changing the date to the December 10th of report back? Do you want to go through an amendment process?
I think that we can we just substitute the date? I think we could just.
Yeah, I'd like to substitute the report back date to December 10th.
Okay. Okay. So we're substituting the date to be September 10th. So moved and seconded.
Yes.
And all those in favor of that technical amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. So it's December 10th.
But I would like to also, may I
Yes, continue.
So on this issue of shifting taxes to the homeowners, when you have a tax like this can actually shrink the tax base. And I would argue that there's a tax shift going on right now. I think a case could easily be made that there's been an ongoing tax shift to homeowners as businesses have left the city of Burlington, have decided to move their equipment other places. So I think in the long run, this will build the commercial and business tax base, which is so important to every homeowner in the city of Burlington should be interested in having a strong and vital commercial tax base. And that's also very much linked to the downtown improvement district and many other things that we are working on right now. So I just wanted to kind of respond to this argument that doing this will shift taxes onto homeowners. I do not think so. I think it will stop a cost shift that has been going on for quite a while.
Thank you, Councilor Nodell. Councilor Hartnett?
Yeah, to my point exactly. I'll even make the case that I think, that it will pay for itself, that it won't even come to that point where we're going to residents for a tax increase. That this will free up a lot of their resources and finances to improve their businesses that will increase their businesses for gross sales retax seats, and we'll see this before any increase to the taxpayers. There's no question.
All right. Thank you, Councilor Hartnett. I think we should be ready for a vote. So the vote is to send this to the Charter Change Committee to come back to us by December 10th, considering the comments from the Board of Finance. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously, and we have moved the business personal property tax on to the Charter Change Committee to come back to us on December 10th. The next item is permit reform. Who is going to put permit reform on the table for us? Councilor Shannon?
I am confused because that's not, was that added
Well,
to the
there's-
agenda?
Permit reform is on the agenda to be potentially moved to the Charter Change Committee.
Correct.
It's, oh, we're putting, okay, sorry.
Mr. President, point of order, I think?
Point of order, Councilor Pine?
If we get like a 5-minute recess on this, what to do next?
Yes.
Because I think
We're in recess for 5, and we'll be back in, it will be 5 minutes. Would city councilors please take their seats? City councilors, please take their seats. And we are going to reconvene the city council meeting back. I'm going to do that one. They're still not listening. All right, we're reconvening the city council meeting at 9:25, back from the recess, as we said, in 5 minutes. And I will look to Councilor Shannon for a motion.
I move to refer the proposed charter changes implementing the organizational changes of the administration's permit reform project to the Charter Change Committee to review the language, but withholding consideration of the merger of the planning department with CEDO. And consider the comments made in the council's work session held on November 26th and report back to the council with recommended charter change language at its December 17th meeting, with the expectation that a proposal regarding the planning department and CEDO will be forthcoming.
Thank you, Councilor Shannon. Second by Councilor Nodell. So then, just to be clear, this will go to the Charter Change Committee for your meeting on the 29th, and it will be now just to discuss the merger or consolidation of the three departments that's proposed right now of zoning, building, and code. And the further part of this reform proposal will be, the mayor may call a special meeting for that on December 3rd. We'll have a Board of Finance meeting on the Downtown Improvement District starting at 5:30 that everyone is invited to. And Councilor Shannon?
Just to clarify that our meeting won't only have that, but also the business personal property
Yes.
tax.
Yes. Got a lot of work.
Point of information,
Point
President?
of information, Councilor Nodell?
Should the report back be December 10th, as with the other one, or not?
No.
Not, okay.
Discussion by the city council. Anybody, any city councilor? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And we have unanimously moved that part of this proposal to the Charter Change Committee, and the mayor may call a special meeting to deal with the other part of this reform proposal. Thank you. We will move ahead now to committee reports. Any committee chair that would like to report on activity to the city council? Councilor Hartnett.
Thank you. Just want to let everyone know that the PAC committee will be meeting here in Contois on December 6th at 6 o'clock. One item on the agenda, and that's the auditorium. And so we will be taking public input. It will be kind of a town hall meeting. I'm kind of jealous of these cards. When I saw these today, I'm in hopes maybe we could get something in the mail to the public about the town hall meeting on the 6th here at 6 o'clock. It will be the only agenda on the PAC. Probably, I think it's 6 to 7:30. I hope for a big turnout. It's December 6th from 6 to 7:30. And I'm hopeful we'll get a big turnout. And I think people are pretty passionate about this issue in Burlington, and it's really the future of the auditorium that's at stake. So I hope you will all come. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Hartnett. Other committee chairs? Councilor Shannon?
The Charter Change Committee will be meeting to discuss the business personal property tax elimination and the permit reform issue on November 29th. So that's this Thursday at, I looked it up. I think it's 6 o'clock in conference room 17.
All right. 6 o'clock Thursday, conference room 17.
I'm going to confirm the time.
All right. If you find that it's different, I'll recognize you again. So we
5
can-
o'clock.
It's 5 o'clock. Okay. 5 o'clock, not 6 o'clock. All right. Other committee chairs? Hearing none, we will move on to city councilors on general city affairs. Councilor Nodell.
Thank you, President Wright. I wanted to bring to the public's attention 2 community meetings this week. The first is on Thursday, November 29th. It's a town hall meeting about the idea of creating a downtown improvement district. It'll be held at 5:30 in the Burlington City Arts space in the second floor. And we're really especially hoping to hear from people who live in and around downtown, because we just really, this impacts them. It will be a benefit to people living downtown, and we need their advice on how the city should move forward with this option. This is we expect a charter change for March, but we're holding, and council has some decisions to make, but we wanted to hear from the public before we made those decisions. And so please come out this Thursday, 5:30, and learn about the Downtown Improvement District and offer your advice. The second meeting is an Old North End meeting about public safety on Wednesday of this week, which is the 28th. We're meeting at the Old North End Arts Center at 5:30 in response to residents' concerns about recent gun violence on the street, on North Champlain Street. And there's actually been 2 recent incidents. And Deputy Chief Wright will be there, so that will be at the Old North End Arts Center at 5:30 this Wednesday, the 28th, and we will get information about the status of those cases and advice on, what do we do about gun violence in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nodell. Councilor Hartnett.
Thank you. I just wanted to give a couple updates on some resolutions. Obviously, the one that was on the agenda tonight that was pulled, given the load of the Charter Change Committee and the timing of this, I just thought it was better that we pull this. It's not time sensitive, and we can bring this back in the future. So people wanted to know why it was pulled. I wanted to give an explanation of why I did so. Second, there's a resolution will be coming to you on the 10th. Councilor Dang and I have been working on it, and it's in regards to MPAs and enhancing MPAs. And so you'll see that in your packets before the following next meeting. Take a look. If you have any questions, contact Councilor Dang or myself. And the third thing I want to talk about is we had a kickoff, I think, last week for week and a half ago for Highlight first night here in Burlington, and we had some funding pieces to that here tonight. But my concern is people think we don't have first night this year, right? And it's going to happen, and it's a great program, and there's been a lot of time and effort and resources spent. So anything the council can do to talk this up and to get it out there. The bracelets are already on sale. They're pink bracelets this year. They're here. Adam Ruth got one on right there. That's $10 for an adult, $5 for children. There's also going to be an opportunity to have scholarships for families. So it's very affordable. It's going to be a great night, and I hope that we can start kind of building some momentum and start talking about this great night here. Couple quick things. Bonfire, brand new event this year. Bonfire down at Waterfront. It's going to be great. And the fireworks are going to be at 8. It's going to be a great event, and so I just really want to start bringing attention to people. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Hartnett. Any other councilor on general city affairs? Hearing none. Councilor Jang.
Yes, I forget last time to talk about this at our last meeting, but I wanted to take the time to really appreciate and let Burlingtonians know that I'm very humble for all the votes that you gave me as Justice of the Peace. Thank you very much. It touched my heart, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Jang. Any other city councilor? Hearing none. Next item is update from Council President. I don't really have any updates. I do want to thank every city councilor for their diligent work on these charter changes. I mean, this is a very ambitious timeline for us. 3 very important charter changes, and we're trying to get a lot done here. So, and also appreciate the work of the Charter Change Committee upcoming in the next couple of weeks. And lastly, this is not really an update, but so council will just have to indulge me for just 2 seconds. But I was told by Councilor Busher recently that Councilor Hartnett had stopped by to talk to her about something, and she was out raking the leaves, and he held the bag for her as she raked up the leaves. And so I was driving down her street, and she was shoveling snow. So I just want to say I one-upped Councilor Hartnett. I got out and shoveled her car out. So that's my update. All right, with that, thank you for that indulgence. We will go to Mayor Weinberger to wrap us up. And although we do have an executive session for a brief update. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, President Wright. That's a difficult update to follow here. I'll have to
or an easy one.
Make more trips down East Avenue.
If you can update mine, if you can top mine, I want to hear what it is.
Let me echo your thanks to the council for the work we've gotten done tonight, starting with an unusual beginning of the meeting as early as 4:30 this afternoon. And I'm appreciative, and I know the staff that worked to get these 3 charter changes to this point are appreciative that we have found a way to advance significantly advance that work and look forward to the additional hard work together in the weeks ahead. One thing I wanted to, someone along the same lines that Councilor Hartnett pointed out, we need people to understand that there's a highlight opportunity, as Councilor Hartnett noted, coming on December 31st, that Burlington is open for the community to come out and celebrate New Year's just as we have been for many years in the past. The same is true for the holiday shopping season. Burlington businesses are very much open for this important time of year for all of our retailers. We celebrated successfully Small Business Saturday this past weekend. I was out with my family, saw a ton of people out as well, and we hope that continues all the way through this season. The concern out there that there might not be sufficient parking this year, we're happy to report that at the busiest times over the last week, there have always been hundreds of available spaces within 3 blocks of Church Street. So I think it's important that we get the message out on that as well, that just as in past holiday seasons, the city downtown is a place you can park if you need to come to the downtown by car to do your shopping. There is also, as was announced last week, a promotion to make parking more affordable, and you can get information on that in a variety of places, including the city's website. President Wright, I'll leave it at that tonight, and look forward to seeing the council again in a couple weeks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, although maybe next week, right?
Yes, we will be in touch quickly about the details of a special meeting for next week. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Clarification.
So item number 8.02 is an update, I understand a brief update, an executive session on contract negotiations.
Yes,
City Attorney Blackwood?
Yes, a brief update, and I'd like to provide you legal advice and update you on matters premature disclosure of which would put the city at a disadvantage.
Okay, and who will need to be staying on this?
The mayor's office staff and the CAO.
All right, is that it? I'll recognize Councilor Mason.
Thank you, President Wright. I'd like to make a motion for a finding consistent with City Attorney's statement.
Okay, is there a second? Second by Councilor Nodell. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the finding, please say aye. We're voting actually in the corner over there. Aye. Aye. Hate to break that up, but any opposed? Okay, we have the finding. Councilor Mason.
Based on the finding, I'd like to make a motion that we go into executive session.
Councilor Mason has moved to go into executive session. Councilor Jang has seconded it. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We will move into executive session, and there's no action needed.
Correct.
Okay, so I think it's going to be brief. Channel 17, do you mind waiting for? Hopefully we'll be out quickly.